the home of inspiration every day.
Most people give up on themselves easily. You know the human spirit is powerful.
From news,
countries across the globe have been hit by the COVID-19 virus.
Views.
There's a global trend to see an increase in GBV incidences, specifically domestic violence.
Sports.
What's he say? It's a really good ball. It's Shabalala.
And music to inspire you every day. This is Vuka Online, your inspiration radio station.
Back. Well, I don't know why I'm saying welcome back, but I suppose because it's a new week, new show, Leadership Masterclass, and as you know already, the kind of conversations we've been having for the last few weeks relate a lot, and they inspire me because we are talking about how can we change the world. Vuka is an inspirational channel, is an inspirational radio station, and I think one of the things I'm always excited about is having inspiring conversations with leaders across the world about what they're doing. But this year, and this period particularly, we are right here at home. We are based in Tshwane, Mamelodi, so the capital of South Africa. So we have to be serving South Africa as well, right? And South Africa assumed the G20 presidency in 2025. And then, of course, the US will be taking it over. Oh, sorry. I'm not going to remove that. I'm human like that. So preceding the US in 2026, and then the South African V20 theme, which is living their values, which is intended both as an aspiration and a call to action. Many times, as with a lot of the work for the G20 and a lot of the work that we do, we talk about values, but we talk about them as like slogans on the wall. But what has been discovered, obviously, through the journey, and with South Africa particularly being at the center of this conversation, it has been felt, as you've been hearing from the previous conversations, it has been felt that it's necessary to deepen um, the, 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 the way these behaviors and this change that we are trying to see in the world through the activity and exercise of values. And the V20 has been a parallel vehicle that has been doing that with the G20 for the last few years. And today, I was saying to Sina here, as well as Themba, I have no idea where they fit in this drama of the V20, but I will let them introduce themselves and then give us a little bit of where do they fit into the picture, and then let's take the conversation from here. Welcome, guys. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Doctor. Privilege.
Excellent. Now let's talk a little bit about who are you guys. So let's start with you, Sena Zungu. Tell us a little bit about who you are and what are you doing with this V20 thing. Because I saw you at that launch meeting the other day, so I kind of recognize you. But tell us a little bit about who you are and why are you here.
I felt like quite a little bit of a chatterbox at launch. So I hope I made a good impression just because I was so fascinated. But anyway, thank you for having me, Dr. Mo. Thank you for inviting me to this platform. And to the listeners, hi, my name is Senamile Zungu. My name means we are happy in isiZulu, and I sort of like to think of that as my core values. The sort of joviality, the sort of connection is a huge part of my value system, and seeing other human beings in our shared humanity. So just an anecdote. But how I fit into this quote drama is that I am the youth advocacy stream lead for Vision 20. I lead a team of incredible young people that are really determined to co-create this system and co-create what values look like. And I use the word co-create because I think we often speak about the youth and we say, oh, they're the leaders of tomorrow, or we need to empower the youth. And while certainly I can acknowledge that is well-meaning, those sort of sentiments. I think that it has this connotation, because language is important, that we're not empowered, or that, you know, we need to be guided, and that's very true. But I think we offer a very unique perspective, and so what me and my team are doing in the context of Values 20 is trying to really push the ethos of sort of co-creation with the youth. And yeah, I'm excited to be able to do that, because in our own right, we are living out values, we are leading in our own way. So I'm super passionate. My day job, I work in consumer research. And so I get to really think about human insights, what are values, what are youth values. My work is very Gen Z. I do research on consumers all across Africa, young consumers. And I also run a podcast on race and privilege called Colorful in my own capacity. We interrogate power dynamics and, you know, historical injustices through this racial lens of where we now find ourselves in post-democratic South Africa. And I do a bunch of other stuff, but I'm going to also let Themba introduce himself to also get a gist of what we hear today. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm going to be asking you this question: when do you sleep?
You know, there's
Themba,
something
over
about
to you.
passion and purposeful work, and I know that Themba, who is very much in the social justice space, will echo these sentiments. I think what binds us all is our shared human experiences, and I think that there is very little in this world that can offer that sort of purpose other than our shared humanity, and figuring out where we fit into this grand structure of the world, where we can think our individual actions seem very insignificant, but as a collective and individually, I think that makes me not want to sleep, because that excites me, and I know that there's work to be done. So
Fantastic. And we'll talk a little bit more about all that work that has to be done. Themba, over to you.
Dr. Makhalima, good day, and thank you for this privilege, and thanks to Sina as well. I'm Thembalethu Seyisi. I'm a lawyer by profession. I'm an admitted attorney of the High Court of South Africa. And currently I'm a researcher at the Center for Social Justice at Stellenbosch University. But in the context of V20, really, I am a co-lead in the solidarity stream. And I want to foreground our discussion today to say we meet at a time when inequality in South Africa is at its most highest. We meet at a time where youth unemployment in South Africa is at its highest. But also, really, we meet at a time where there's been over 100 people in the past week reported to having died in the floods in Tata. And really, what does that mean for us as we close off Youth Month? What does that mean for young people in South Africa? What does it mean for the values of solidarity? Because as we understand solidarity in its plain and simplest form, really, is anchored and central in Ubuntu, ukuncedana, so to say, as we would say in Xhosa, is that those who have should extend a hand to those who don't have. Just last week, it was reported on the news that in Kayamandi in Stellenbosch, where I am, an 8-year-old died because of fire. What does that mean 31 years into democracy, that we've locked our people into squalor and poverty? And I hope as we close Youth Month, that we conscientize the youth to say, Senamile said there's work to be done, but here's this work that we need to do together.
Yeah. No, sounds quite moving and quite fascinating. And I think it's always fascinating when we have these conversations, right? That's fine. So when we have these conversations, and then you find that they're kind of problem based sometimes. So maybe let's take a step back a little bit, and then we'll talk about what the problem is. But 30 years down the line, or 31 years, or however, I don't even think it's that long, actually, because I think it's about 15 if you really think how we carried it. But nevertheless, what are we celebrating? Before we talk about what are we solving, is there nothing to celebrate at all?
There's absolutely a lot to celebrate. I mean, South Africa is not nearly what it looked like. Dr. Makhalima, I want to caution us from moving away too quickly from the uncomfortability that is brought about the problem and jumping into the solution.
I don't have a problem with the discomfort, but
yes,
I want us to talk a little bit first. We'll come to the discomfort. Let's talk first. Aren't we celebrating anything?
Of course, we're celebrating the bravery of the youth of 1976. We honor them for their courage and we recognize their sacrifice. That we do undoubtedly and unreservedly. There's no reservations about that. And of course, the government of South Africa has done pretty okay from moving us and for catering. Here's the thing, right? When people speak about inequality and they want to compare with the apartheid government, I always say, hold on, we can't compare the two because the one government had to cater for one group of people, whereas this government has to cater for all of us in our different shades, in our different needs. So the two really, we are comparing two different things. So that wouldn't make real sense. We've done okay. We've got a progressive constitution, but in that we still are leaving so many people behind. So there's definitely something to celebrate. The two can coexist. We can look at the problem while celebrating the achievements.
Yeah, cool. What about you? What do you have to say about the celebration, Senamile?
I think I'm already loving this discussion. We're off to a really great start. Themba, I want to echo your sentiments. I think that in the context of where we're at in South Africa today, we can hold space for two truths. The truth is we have some of the most optimistic, vibrant youth. As I said, I spend a lot of my time doing research on Gen Z sentiments and youth sentiments across the country. In a recently published study, this is freely available, Kantar's Mzansi 2025 Barometer, we asked South Africans, how optimistic are you about the next 5 years, our country outlook? This is in the face of a youth unemployment rate that sits to close to 60%. We are in a crisis, but the young people of this country said that they are optimistic. They're optimistic about this future country over the 5 years of the outlook. They are optimistic about even their future financial position. And so I sit at a point where I'm holding the truth of a youth that is optimistic, a youth that is vibrant, a youth, and that is something that's to celebrate, a youth that is critical, a youth that is disillusioned with traditional institutions, a youth, but nevertheless, a youth that is vibrant and optimistic and forward-thinking and even innovative, solutionist. But also we sit with a youth that has been, we're sitting with this unemployment crisis. We're sitting with a youth that is spoken down to, that is usually patronized. And we're sitting in a country with the highest inequality rates in the world. And those that have are sitting with this false illusion of safety, building the walls up higher, ignoring the problem. And what keeps me up at night, as Themba says, there's work to be done, is that when young people feel hopeless, when young people feel that they are not listened to, and when people in general are hungry and are facing the sort of issues that we continue to ignore, that to me is a recipe for disaster. And so 32 years down the line, we can celebrate that South Africa is the gold standard of how we move forward from a very difficult and traumatic past. There is no precedent for a country that has been able to move into democracy as smoothly and coexist in the context that we've had to with our oppressors. Literally the people that tried to exterminate Black people, we've managed to coexist in them in that society. And I think that's remarkable. That's something to celebrate. But on the other side of the coin,
there's work to be done.
There's work to be done.
Yeah. So let's talk about the work that needs to be done. What exactly should or is not happening that we really should be shining a light on, particularly in the context of the G20 and the work of the V20 in this instance? Go ahead, in a few.
Doc, I think like I said, we've done okay. I don't want to plunge us to say we've done well. 11.5 million on SRD grant is not doing well out of a population of 60 something million people. But let's bring it down to youth and G20 and V20. What I've not heard the G20 shepherds speaking about is student debt. We are sitting with billions. We are in debt. And what this does, Doc, in the sense that we send Thembalethu, who is from KwaNobuhle, Etinach, in the Eastern Cape, we send him to Stellenbosch. Firstly, he gets to Stellenbosch, he needs 60-something thousand for accommodation a year. He needs 60-something thousand for tuition. We are not talking food yet. We are not talking pocket money yet. So already that student is in debt if you don't have NSFAS because your father is a teacher and your mom is a nurse. So you're considered too rich to be funded by NSFAS, but you're actually too poor to be self-funded, which is what we call the missing middle. So
because you are in the middle there somewhere.
You are in the middle. Your parents are public servants. You are deemed okay, but
they earn 25,000 rand, but 25,000 rand is not even enough.
25,000. Out of that 25,000, there's 3 other kids. There's electricity. There's the bond to be paid. There's the car, etc., etc. We can deal with that at a later stage.
True.
So this particular Thembalethu is already owing the university at the time he finishes. Maybe the parents in between are able to pay. By the time he finishes, he owes the university 4 years after the LLB degree. He owes over 500,000. Where is he going to get this? And the university says, sorry, sir, we're not going to give you your certificate for you to go find employment because you owe us. And the employer says, but we need your certificate to hire you. We can't take your word for it that you've got this LLB degree that you say you have. So that student is spam bang in the middle. What do we do with those kinds of students? And I've got a solution and I've been part of the solution. But as I said, I want us to deal with the uncomfortability of the situation. I've not heard G20 shepherds talk about that and spotlighting that to the rest of the group to say, actually, what is America doing? What's Brazil doing, etc., etc., and what can we learn from them?
Yeah. Although I suppose, Themba, to your point, then one could say that's one piece that seems to be quite difficult. Yes, and of course, the US has literally exactly the same issue. They haven't been able to.
And that's why I use them as an example.
Yeah, but let's assume now I'm Bonang here or I'm Daya and I'm what's his name, Priya, and I essentially have other priorities that I think are important in this instance. So how do we decide that which of the social justice issues should we be paying attention to? What's the conversation like there?
If I may just respond to that, Doc, I think that, you know, I see value in zeroing in and honing on certain issues, but I think that there's a reason why the values theme has become all-encompassing and so broad. And I think often to the issues that we bring up in the sense of what with our problems, where do we start? I often feel as though narrowing it down and saying, okay, well, we can't speak about this. What about this? What about that? I believe that in a country as complex as South Africa, we need to take an intersectional lens. One issue should not be prioritized to the detriment of another because it is inextricably linked. I'll make an example. The USAID revoking funding. That issue affected so much access to South Africans' mothers' HIV transmission, mother to child. It had dire circumstances. And I'm going to reference this because it's Global Pride Month. And I've been involved in speaking about queer issues all over the world this month. And so the rhetoric about that is okay, we cannot, these are not issues, or LGBTQ issues or issues of inclusion are nice to
they're
have.
not important. It's
not important.
Yes.
And I think that in engaging research and engaging, like, it matters more than ever to have an intersectional lens. Access of revoking ARVs, that affects the queer community on a disproportionate level, and that transmission can, it is a health issue for mothers, for children, but to silo it as a singular issue is not also giving the problem the broad lens that it needs. Going to zero in and find that you don't understand the dynamics of student debt or that whole chain. And so to isolate the issue and say, okay, well, right now we're only going to be speaking about the food crisis. The food crisis is interlinked to so many things, education. It is, I think that we have a benefit here. We have great minds all assembling. I think everybody has a voice and an expert on what area. And I think there is value in listening to all of those voices. I think that there is value in looking at each of these issues that we face through an intersectional lens.
Yeah. And I like the whole idea of intersectionality because you talk about the issue, which is a very important issue around student debt, because it actually keeps people prisoner forever. It's like, but then somebody then goes like, oh, but there's also this issue of Mahadi, right? Because you have young people getting to get married very quickly, and then they can't afford, and then there's all of this tradition, right? And then there is the issue of unemployment. We spoke about unemployment. It's really, really bad. There's issues of suicide and mental health, which is a big issue. There's bullying. Oh my goodness, there's a lot. So where do the values in V20, how can we work together with this? Because this is complex. It's a lot. What are we doing? What are you guys doing as far as this is concerned? Or what can be done? Maybe it's not just because of you, because I think later I want to ask a question. What can people that are watching and listening to this do? But what is the program for V20 and G20 in this instance?
So if I may start, Sena, and
Go ahead.
really V20, particularly the advocacy side of things, is to do what we've just done now, Doc, is to shine a light on things that people wouldn't ordinarily bring to the fore. And of course, we'll have a communique to the G20, which meets in November, and say, these are the conversations we've been having with ordinary South Africans, listening to radio stations that are situated in Mamelodi in Pretoria, for example. We are reaching a different audience to that of mainstream. That's the one thing that we've consciously decided to do differently, is to meet our people where they are really. And we are grateful to Vuka station for this particular partnership. But also values are important in the sense that everything we do from the moment we wake up, every step and every action we take is actually a value-based action. You do it because you think, you believe in that thing, or you believe that it's going to take you to where you want to be. So somewhere. So if you get into a car, you believe that car is going to take you to work. It's a value decision, right? We are saying, why don't we then, in everything we do, from policy to implementation of policy, put values at the forefront? And we've chosen various provocative values of Ubuntu, ownership, and of course, we've sticked with the G20 values on solidarity, equality, and sustainability. So we ask, or we advocate, that from this G20 in November, from South Africa's G20, everything we do going forward must be values-based, because we believe that values are what build institutions. If we're going to end unemployment, if we're going to decrease inequality, it has to be values-based. Because without values, what are we doing? You come to work, you say, but I don't like Sena because she's a woman and I don't want to work with women. And then that's the end of the story.
So what? Yeah. And then what? Yeah.
Because we don't have values. A white person comes into us and says, but I don't like Black people. I don't want to hire them. That particular value and provocation on ownership and agency really confronts such discussions of employment equity in particular. So this advocacy stream is really about that, advocating and agitating and bringing forth what people wouldn't ordinarily talk about. But we've also got a research stream that whatever we talk about must be research-based. We can't say there's unemployment. Government must fix unemployment without having the data, the research to say this is what government is doing, but this is where they're missing the point.
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about that piece, I think there's a space, and you guys will tell me. I'm just another guy here. People will come and say, "Oh, government solve unemployment for us," but I don't think it's possible for government to solve unemployment because government employs about what 1.2 million people in this country. That's how big it is. Yes, it can put policies into place to kind of get people, give people what? I mean, we talk about the Employment Equity Act, we talk about skills development levy. What about employers? Where do they fit into this conversation, and also in the conversations around the V20? And I'm talking to you, Themba, before around particularly this issue here.
Absolutely. The general feeling that when people speak and say government must solve unemployment, I absolutely agree with you, Doc. It's not possible. Government cannot employ all of us. The correct thing to say is that government must create conditions that make it easier for people to create employment. Let's not forget that aspect. We want to be creators of employment as well, because this finding a job was Verwoerd's dream for Black people in particular. That we must be the ones who collect wood and fetch water. But no, we actually want to be the one that create new sources of water, that research where can we find new sources of water.
Yes.
By the way, Black people have done this for years. The pyramids, mathematics, these are creations by Black people. So it's not correct to say government must just create employment, but they must work with business to create conditions that will allow all of us to create employment or to hire people. We must be at a state where we can actually, particularly young people, we must be at a state where we can actually choose. Do I want to practice law, or do I want to open up my practice? And of course, funding is a huge stumbling block for young people. So that's actually where government comes in with their programs.
Yeah. You are on the Leadership Masterclass, and we are having interesting conversations here about values. We are having the challenges of youth that are very complex in this beautiful but very complex country of ours. And I have Senamile Zungu as well as Thembalethu, who are with us, and they are part of the V20, which is currently having and highlighting some of these. But I was saying to someone yesterday in the V20 that this feels like it's our 1994 all over again, because in 1994 we had this whole nice constitution, and then we created it, and it was kumbaya, taking hands together, and I think for 4 or 5 years it felt good, and then reality hit, as it would, that actually there's still a lot of work to be done, and I'm kind of excited about this. So Senamile, when we come back, I want to hear also what your thoughts are around this role of values, the V20, and all of that. And then at some point, we'll then start wrapping it up, because we want to talk a little bit to the people that are listening and watching. So, what is their role? What should they do? So, maybe thinking a little bit about that. But we are more music, more inspiration. So, we will be back in a few minutes after this piece of music.
How do you know the life of personal coach you're about to work with is who they say they are? How do you know if they can do the job? At the Africa Board for Coaching, Consulting and Coaching Psychology, we can tell you. So, before you share your secrets and spend your money, check with us first. Visit www.abccccp.com or call us on 012-751-7608. The ABCCP, the professional body for coaches.
Yes, my people, welcome back to the Leadership Masterclass. And I am sitting with the youth of South Africa here. Africa is the youngest continent on Earth right now. At some point, the conversation, when it went like that, it felt like it's an advantage. But the more I travel across the world, I'm realizing, yay, sneaking about, because it feels like there's a world that's actually wanting to exploit and take advantage of this youthfulness. I was at a Hope Makers conference. I sit with some of the people who creating hope across the world type of a thing. And as I was listening to the work around AI and all of that, and I was listening, I was going, most our youth are in trouble because when it comes to reading, writing, and comprehension, as far as studies are concerned in South Africa, it's a big issue. And if you're going to be using AI, it kind of requires someone who can do at least those basic things and then think. So when I say that, what does it bring to your mind, both of you? Maybe let's start with you, Snap.
Yes, this is also a topic I'm very passionate about. I think since we're speaking about the youth of 76, one of the things that I took issue with, perhaps I'm being overly critical, as you visit the Hector Peterson Memorial and you walk through Vilakazi Street and you read the sort of copy that is detailing what happened over the day. The references to the day keep on saying that the youth were protesting against Afrikaans being used as a medium of instruction. And yes, that is true. I do believe it is overemphasizing or simplifying a very complex issue. The youth of 76 were protesting against Afrikaans as a medium of instruction, but that was just a tip of the iceberg. What happened with Bantu education is something that I believe, even in our own, the way that we document this piece of legislation across our museums and the way we speak about it, is not with enough emphasis on the legacy that it left on our country that reverberates till to this day. Now, apartheid had many perfect policies. I mean, I know I'm speaking about it as if I'm reverent, but it was truly a system. I can't think of any other one of oppression that has stood the test of time or almost solidify so much because of its
very intentional. Intentional.
It's nearly
and
perfect.
Very integrated. Yeah.
It is executed with the level of detail that I have not seen in other sort of atrocities across the world, even the Holocaust. So again, back to my point, I digress.
Sure.
Bantu education, I believe, has had the most effect on keeping Black South Africans still in a position of impoverishment, in a position of lack of progress, because of what it did with education and how we think about education, and education even as a value, as we pass it down to our children, how we internalize it. Knowledge is power. I do believe even spatial planning, I don't believe has been able to solidify what Bantu education did. And I don't think we speak enough about the psychological effects on Black South Africans as it relates to Bantu education that reverberate to this day. I'm sure you can agree. So when we hear now AI, I hear reading, I hear comprehension. That's another layer to a problem that I feel as though we've had as Black South Africans in terms of our relationship to education and access as well, institutionally, who got access, even former Model C schools that now have a governing body that can control essentially our schools became more diverse, but yet the allocation of resources didn't. And for all intents and purposes, even institutionally, they remained white. How we teach children to be critical thinkers, even about our history. And so AI is adding to a layer of a problem with basic education that I think did not start now, that I think it can be tracked to Bantu education.
When Senamile, before Themba, you come in, and then you can come in. I mean, should we still be talking about the impact of Bantu education? Because I think there's 2 generations since Bantu education. Is it that impact? Has it had that impact, that much of an impact?
I think so. I look at how we classify schools, look at the dedication of resources to rural schools, look at how there are children still using pit latrines. There are the student to teacher ratio of the is reminiscent of an apartheid policy that said the allocation we give to those schools, the access. For me, yes, we still need to be speaking about it because conditions in certain schools certainly mirror Bantu education.
Yeah.
So did we ever eradicate
so it's very
it at all?
structural. Yeah. So it's very structural, and it's ingrained in how we think and how we do things. Themba?
I want to underscore and add to Senamile's point without taking anything away that she said. She says she takes issue with that. I also want to take issue. I feel very provoked because that study said something along the lines, I think it was 8 out of 10 primary school children who couldn't read for comprehension in any of the 11 South African
11 languages.
languages.
Yes. Yeah.
But what the study should actually have told us is the classrooms in primary school have not transformed. If you are in Khayelitsha in the Western Cape, you get taught English in isiXhosa. So if somebody is coming to do a study and they want to test your comprehension in English, they're going to test you in English. But throughout your 5 years in primary school, you've been taught English in isiXhosa. And of course, you're going to fail that test.
Yeah.
The study doesn't tell us how people understand mathematics better, actually, when they're being taught in their home language. The study does none of that. So I think what we should be debating and what we should be talking about is how do we transform the ways and methods of teaching and learning from primary school up to varsity. I wasn't taught to work with AI at varsity. I have to teach myself now post-varsity, right? I have to acquire the skills of working with AI and large language models. So if somebody came to test me now, I'll be part of the 80% that doesn't know how to use AI. Because
you will look like an idiot. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. But also we must be careful because language matters. So if we are saying 80% of the kids in primary school can't read or write or comprehend, they're stupid. Neuroscience tells us they're going to believe it. You're going to enter a system that says, here, in this system, 80% of the people don't understand. And you're really going to start performing like the majority.
As if that's the truth.
Language matters. And I had hoped that the Department of Education would do a study that makes us understand the whole picture to say, this is why actually we're having these results.
Yeah. Context matters.
There's also plenty of that, though, Themba, if I can challenge a little bit, but there's plenty of that. I mean, the University of Stellenbosch recently released a data. I've worked in schools, and I agree with you. I think for about 10 years I worked in schools, and it's horrid what's happening there. For example, teachers can't teach. We closed teachers' colleges. And when we closed teachers' colleges, teachers could not learn how to teach. They went to university where they learned the theory. And then I sit in schools with a principal and the school management team that have no clue how to deal with a child, whether somebody has a disability, because that's yet another intersection in this instance, right? And then let's make it even worse, because I think this is where the values conversation comes in. Somebody goes back home, this child goes back at home, the mother or the parents, let me just say, the parents are not there because both of them are at work. They are coming in at 7 o'clock, 7 p.m. at night. There's a whole homework and all of that, but this child is at home by themselves for all of that time. How do we expect values to then be transferred? Because I believe the work of education and educating children is first of all at home, uh, not at school. And the challenges I saw was that in schools, teachers now are struggling to have to be now values holders for parents that are absent. That's very complex.
Yeah.
What do we do now with that?
Quite complex, Doc. And for this, and the simple answer to that difficult question is that values must run across the spectrum, from home, school to the workplace. The employer must know that if I'm expecting my worker to be here at 8 and leave at 6 to drive 2 hours to Khayelitsha, they'll be there at 8. What kind of an ecosystem am I, as the employer, contributing to? So I'm part of the problem if I'm the employer, because I allow a system that gets parents to be away from their homes for 12 hours a day. So I think really boils down to inequality. And of course, spatial injustice in South Africa is a thing. If you're staying in Pretoria, you have to work in Joburg. That's almost 2 hours of traffic in the morning, another 2 hours
exactly
of traffic
2 hours, I know.
back. That's 4 hours on the road. If you have to be there at 8, you have to leave at 6. And if you're only leaving work at 4, you are lucky to be back in Pretoria at 6. So we really have to rethink our model of living. And the values approach says, put people at the center.
Creating work in the townships, right? Because I think for some reason there's this idea that people have to live, because that's an apartheid idea. You talked about that whole special design. That special design was about separating us from sources of income and economy, right? But we can't solve it in a linear way by now saying everybody should go into towns. In fact, that's the problem. Because now if you go to KZN, 60% of South Africa is rural. What are we doing with the rural piece of this country and the rural youth that are living there? Because they can't all come to Joburg.
Yeah, and I think this is the reason I also started referencing sort of the historical context, because that's exactly what it did. It stripped us from the ability to transfer values. And I think when you're operating from a survivalist mindset, it was designed to be that way. Concepts like values start to seem like luxuries. They start to seem, when you have to navigate the mental load of traveling to work or your children, you cannot emphasize the way that you would when you're not on survival mode, an importance of values of education. And so that's what Bantu education and the rest of the apartheid system, it designed to strip us of that hope. It designed to strip us of our shared humanity, of community, of agency. And I think if we don't acknowledge that and how that's filtered down right now, we're going to struggle to be able to embed values moving forward. So it's a call to self, as Themba is saying. And I think when we say call to self and we center the human being, that's when we're saying, okay, let's have those values, right? We all operate on values, as Themba so articulately put, but sometimes we're operating on it not even cognizant of what we're doing. So let's center the discussion. And I think once we can give vocabulary to those types of actions, it sparks an intentionality in it as well. And then once you have vocabulary to be able to articulate an issue or articulate a solution, or even how you live that internally, we all have values. We believe in solidarity. We all fundamentally believe in equality. We live it out in our everyday lives, but giving it that vocabulary, and exactly when we have conversations, what you do with Vuka Online Radio, we begin to conscientize ourselves, and therefore that sparks intentional action. And that's what we're hoping to do here, even across rural, urban.
Yeah, you are on Vuka Online Radio. We are talking values, V20, and conversations that hopefully change the world, right? So we're hoping at least one person out of the 200,000 odd people across the world that are listening to us can take one action and go. But we need to take a short break. We are wrapping up with our guests, Senamile, as well as Thembalethu, who are working with the V20. And when we come back, the conversation, I was actually going to provoke with something else, but there's just so much to talk about, right? But I'm asking a question. Someone who is listening right now, what is the action they can take in their own little corner that will support the interests or the plan for the V20? We'll be back after this.
The Africa Center for Work-Based Learning is a professional development center for professionals who aim to improve their professional standing. This means that the learning programs we run are more than just academic programs. They are work-based programs that focus on leveraging your current experience as a professional to build your overall profile. A year down the line, the Africa Center for Work-Based Learning is developing into a preferred center for professional development in Pretoria, with 8 professional development faculties including accounting, teaching, entrepreneurship, as well as IT and many more. For more information, go to acwbl.org or dial +27 12 751 7608. The Africa Center for Work-Based Learning, where work is learning.
Hey, I work in organizations. Welcome back, my people. I work in organizations, and it's always fascinating, this conversation about values, because you would have all of these values splattered across uh, the wall, and it kind of prompted me to start doing a little bit of research around values. And something interesting emerged that shocked me. And it's kind of like a bit of a provocation as well here, because it presents a very big difficulty. Only 18% of people in an organizational space, a shared space, actually share your most important values, which means 82% of people around you don't actually believe what you believe. But we walk around as if we all believe in the same thing, right? And that kind of shocked me. And I think one of the things that then excites me a little bit excites me and scares me about the G20 and the V20 work is, hey, how do we consolidate and make sure that we share that same value? So maybe let me throw this question to you guys, not necessarily in terms of what should we do, because I'm supposing we are all discovering, all of us, right? What a person that's sitting at home or wherever they are listening to this, what can they do and what should they look out for as far as the work of the V20 is concerned?
I will say, this is because I'm finding this conversation so rich. Let us have the conversations. What we are doing, more especially the research and policy guidance arm of our V20, is we are having these discussions. We're going to record them in policy guidelines. So I found your stat fascinating, that although we may all agree internally, in working in consumer research, I know that there's a difference between what people say they do versus how they actually behave. And so I think a big part of that is to have it on record. Let's agree on what we think we should be living out, what values we think apply to all these conversations. how do we move forward as individuals? And then we hold ourselves accountable precisely because we know human beings are fickle. A value can change. And that's not to say that's not okay. But I think that continuous dialogue and holding each other accountable, there's such power in that. And so with an individual, I can only say, look inward, feed into the discussion, and hold your leaders accountable.
Yeah, thank you. Themba?
Of course, accountability is hugely important. But also let's practice accountability for ourselves as let's hold ourselves accountable. So I would say to anybody who's listening, let them join us in holding themselves accountable and becoming ambassadors of values, right? We've got a few values, but they can take any one of these that I'm going to call out and say, from today, I'm going to live my life in a manner that promotes the value of either dignity, Ubuntu, integrity and ethical governance, agency and accountability, and of course, equity, depending where you find yourself. And the challenge is that choose the one that you wouldn't ordinary, that's not easy to practice. So if you whatever you are and you don't like equity, choose equity and ownership. Choose the most difficult one. If you're a rude person who don't like affording others dignity, choose that one. That's one aspect. Join in on leaving the talk and holding yourself accountable and being a champion of V20. And of course, there's a myriad of activities that people can join us in. Our summit, our big summit is on the 17th of October in Cape Town. We'd love as many as possible people to join us. We'll have a conversation on values at the Nelson Mandela Foundation. We'll be joined by Nedbank and Sanlam again in August. So people can really come and say, but beyond the talking, really, we are teaching on values. We will be partnering with a team of lawyers to say, how do we bring values into the constitutional terrain of things? You would know just last week on the 26th of June, the Freedom Charter was 70 years old. And of course, we know the Freedom Charter was then, those ideals were infused into the Constitution. How do we teach people? Because education, as Nelson Mandela said, is the most powerful weapon we can use to change the world. So if people know their rights, they can vindicate their rights. So that's also part of V20 work.
I like the challenge you've just shared there, because when you then ask people to pay attention to what value don't I demonstrate the most of what the V20, the collective values that we want to embrace, because I think even if we have different values, but solidarity, for example, I like the example that you gave around what solidarity looks like. Right? It's so if your parent is not at home, but next door, there's somebody. So can somebody from next door come and open and do, because we've lost that. I think that when you guys talk about Ubuntu and the concept of Ubuntu, I think that's what we're talking about, because solidarity looks like practically looking out for somebody else. And when dignity talks about looking out for somebody else, if they don't have food and they don't have anything to wear, you kind of have to go and not embarrass them, but get them to have something to wear. Closing words. We are so out of time, but it's been such a fascinating conversation.
A parting shot from my side, Doc, on adding to what you've just said. If we don't practice these values, we really do so at our own peril. Because we know that a child who does not feel the warmth of the village burns that village down. And that's not what we want for South Africa.
Ooh, love that. So now?
Yeah, parting words for me for young people as well is I just want you to emphasize your values of ownership and agency. I know that the world is telling you that you are very disempowered at the moment. I validate that. I think there's a lot of issues, but I'm seeing young people doing such incredible things. I'm seeing the optimism. I'm seeing the innovation, and so I want to urge you to lean into that and let's co-create with our leaders.
Yeah. Thank you so much, both. There's just so little time to actually have. There's just so much to actually talk about. I've had so much fun with this conversation, and I'm looking forward to connecting again sometime, because this is not the end of the conversation really, because this thing is going on, and there's the October. Uh, um, uh, Summit that you guys are having, and then of course there's the main G20 that's happening one day in November. I would like to actually invite you guys also, particularly the two of you, to the Vuka Online Inspiration Conference that we are having in October. And I think it's like the second week of October. I just don't know the dates, but Douglas will actually get in touch and give you the details. It will be so good, because the concept that we're talking about today is the youth shall lead. So it would be very interesting to have the both of you there if you can make it. But thank you so much, Sena, for your contribution. Thank you so much, Themba. And that was my conversation there with the two of our guests. Until we meet again next week on the Leadership Masterclass. Have a good one.
The home of inspiration every day.
Most people give up on themselves easily. You know the human spirit is powerful.
From news,
Countries across the globe have been hit by the COVID-19 virus.
Views,
There's a global trend to see an increase in GBV incidences, specifically domestic violence.
sports,
What's he say? It's a really good ball. It's Shabalala.
and music to inspire you every day. This is Vuka Online, your inspiration radio station.